All right, Cory Lavalette, North State Journal and The Athletic, my friend, Radio Row or Press Row during Hurricanes season, occasional guest in the second intermission. Man, you bailed me out all year. I thank you so much for waking up after a long season to do this with me. We had a call, our last call before the break, asking about Andrei Svechnikov. So I keep starting with goaltending. Let's start with somewhere else. I think we all know that Freddie Anderson wasn't good enough in this series, and I don't know if he can really be the goaltender going forward for this franchise. But Andrei Svechnikov, I think we all agree, he had a really good playoffs. And we understand that we obviously missed him last year when he was out with the injury. But what's your read on where he is, what they need from him, and can he get there?
Well, it was kind of a stop and start year for him. Obviously coming off the knee surgery, was late getting, the start on the season, kind of gets rolling and then takes that cross check from Logan Stanley and is out again. I think we saw his potential in this postseason. He was a difference maker almost every night.
Yep.
But you need him to elevate to being an 80-point player, a 30-goal scorer. You need him to be that player every night. You need him to stay healthy. All of those things. I mean, if you're going to pay this guy, more than $7 million, and you're going to say he's one of our franchise cornerstones, then the expectations have to go beyond the eye test, right? You can't score just twice in the playoffs. He's an immense talent. He's maybe the most top to bottom, most talented player on the team. He needs to now, piece all that together and become a dominant every night player.
Cory Lavalette, North State Journal and The Athletic at Cory Lav on Twitter. We were commiserating in the parking lot after the game, and we're all just standing around. We were discussing it. Like, we saw Chris Kreider, right? And I think Kreider might be a little bit taller, maybe a little bit bigger. I don't know if he's faster. Andre won the fastest skating contest at the All-Star game a couple years ago, but whatever. I think that's who Carolina would like him to be more like, right? They would like him to be more like a Chris Kreider who could pump in a bunch of goals. My only fear is that he's more like Joe Thornton. Not that that's bad, but that he's more of a distributor than a goal scorer, because he is a phenomenal creator and passer. But I'd love to see him, be more of a goal scorer.
Yeah, I don't know that he'll ever be a Chris Kreider type, because Kreider is, kind of in that Zach Hyman mold of a guy, even in a Steph Nason mold, the guy who's not going to score more than usually a stick length away from the net. And that's not Svechnikov's game. And frankly, it's not necessarily his strength. But, you need him to evolve into the power forward who can, he could be a Patrick Laine type with the physicality added into it. Now he's, to your point, he sees himself almost more as a passer than a scorer. I don't know that you're ever going to change the whole mindset of a player, but he sees himself more as Evgeny Kuznetsov than he ever saw himself as Alex Ovechkin.
Right.
But you would love to see him get a little more of that Alex Ovechkin in his game. A guy who can beat goalies with his shot from the perimeter, can throw players around all around the ice. And his speed is and his defensive play was good in this series too.
I think so.
The Aho goal, that's him getting a puck up the boards and creating an odd man rush after a long shift in your own end. And he did it a couple times last night. There's so much to like there. You want to see the pieces fall into place. It's, he's still young, but you're getting to the point where you are who you are. And this coming season, I think he needs to show that he can be healthy and that he can, you got to score at least 30, I think. You can't be a 20-goal scorer. You just can't be.
I agree. Cory Lavalette, North State Journal and The Athletic. And he is still young, but it is year 6. And even though he came to the league as an 18-year-old, The experience, I mean, it ages you, but it is year 6. The power play, which was so good during the course of the year, and was good against the Islanders, at least it scored 5 times out of 15, was non-existent against the Rangers. They got the Brady Shea goal at the end of Game 4. That was great. And they got the Jarvis goal last night, but 2 out of 20, whatever the numbers ended up being, might have been more. That's a big disparity. Special teams really lost the first part of the series. Special teams didn't lose the rest of the series, but it lost the first part of the series. Did you notice anything about the power play? Is there something about it that just kind of reverted to power plays past?
My thought on the power play has always been you just need to be okay on it throughout the regular season. You don't need to be the greatest because power plays ebb and flow.
Right.
And unfortunately, it ebbed and flowed on them in the first half of this series. It really, tanked out. And then you get into the second part of this series and the games start to become let the boys play.
Right.
So they only scored twice on the power play, but how many opportunities did they have in the last, couple games?
Right.
So you're finding success, but now that aspect of the game has kind of gone away, which, should play into the Hurricanes' hands as a 5-on-5 team. But when you rely on the power play in the regular season, you want it to convert in the playoffs. This series kind of totally flipped over. The Rangers' power play disappeared.
Yeah.
In the second half of this series. And so now, to me, it's always about, are you just hitting at the right time? In 2006, that power play wasn't particularly great. Now, they had tons of opportunities because of the way the game was called coming out of the lockout. Right. So they scored a lot on the power play, but as far as where they ranked in the league, it was middle of the pack. And then they got into the playoffs and they were one of the best. And that, I don't know how you game plan for we're going to be a good power play team in playoffs. It just is what it is. And, the thing that I think we should all recognize is no matter what they think about the power play, the pieces on it are going to be different next year.
Yeah.
There's so much change coming that, the change might not be philosophical in any way. It might be, just manpower wise, who is going to be out there? There's going to be a lot of changes. There's tons of free agents and there's other guys that you wonder if they can bring them back.
All right. I didn't want to make this too much about, I'll ask you about 2 guys real quick. And they probably can't, I don't think there's any physical way they bring both back. But I'll start with Martin Necas as a restricted free agent with arbitration rights. I thought we saw a much better version of Marty in the playoffs. Didn't score a ton, but I liked the way he played, especially later on in this series. What are your thoughts on what the future is for Marty here?
Well, I thought the first half of the game last night was how you need him to play. Mm-hmm. He's in on the forecheck before he scores a goal. He scores in front of the net. I don't think he needs to be at the net all the time, but he needs to be in the middle of the ice.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many factors here that I think about. Andrei Svechnikov was treated like the golden child when he showed up, and he scored his first goal. And they presented him with a plaque for it shortly after, and they actually made sure the media was there to see it.
Dougie Hamilton was not happy that we were there.
No, why are they there? I believe.
Right, that's exactly what he said, man. I get it.
And then Martin Necas scored his first career goal shortly after, and there was no pomp and circumstance. And Svechnikov, and understandably, Svechnikov got his big deal coming out of his ELC. And Necas didn't, but Necas had that really bad fourth year.
Yeah.
There's so many factors here. I think there's so much weird vibes between the team and the player that, Necas feels like he's a center and he's, Rod has never trusted him in that role.
Nope.
They slid his contract a year, so he essentially played 4 years on an entry-level contract. He got treated kind of like a second-class citizen compared to Andrei Svechnikov, whether that's deserving or not. So if I was him, I would feel like maybe there's an opportunity for me somewhere to, have somebody be excited about me, let me try to play center, let me be the player I want to be outside of the confines of the way Rod wants to play. Now, you could make an argument, maybe he goes somewhere and becomes a great player on a bad team. That should be your worry, is if you're Martin Necas, is what's more important to you. Do you want to be on a great team, or do you want to be a guy who puts up a bunch of points and has a bunch of dazzling plays? But there's a big decision to be made there, and I just don't see the Hurricanes being like, Marty, here's an 8-year deal worth $7. They're not going to pay him more than Svechnikov.
No.
And here's an 8-year deal worth $7 million. Come be one of our cornerstone players. I have a hard time seeing them do it, especially when they have as many holes as they're going to have this offseason, and that's your big chip. You could do a lot.
Yeah.
Finding somebody who sees Martin Necas' skills, and I mean, I said Svechnikov is the most skilled player, but Necas isn't far behind. And just salivates over the possibilities of handing the keys of their offense to this kid.
And on top of that, Seth Jarvis is going to get paid this offseason, I would imagine. Jacob Slavin's going to get paid this offseason, I would imagine. And the other player, and I think it might be a none, but it's certainly an either or, is the pursuit of trying to keep Jake Gensel, who I think enjoyed his time here. I think that's always going to July 1, and I also think that it's always going. I mean, I don't see the Hurricanes giving a 30-year-old player as good as Jake Gensel is, although I think he was in some ways disappointing in this round of the playoffs. I don't see them giving him an 8-year deal. I also don't know what they're going to pay Jake Gensel, and I think on the open market, he probably gets 9+, no?
I mean, if he wanted to stay in Pittsburgh and they weren't offering him enough to stay there, I very much doubt he's going to take a hometown discount for a team that he played a few months for.
Right.
And to your point, this organization, outside of Jacob Slavin, this organization is not going to give a big long contract to a 30-year-old player.
Right.
It's not going to happen. Like I don't see a path to a 7-year deal or an 8-year deal for Jake Gensel. And he would be dumb to take a 2-year deal or Dmitry Orlov can do that because he's going to come out of this and still be young enough to get another deal, after next season.
Right.
Probably from another team and cash in again. Jake Gensel is a 30-year-old forward who plays a rugged style he's not very big. And if he spends 2 years here on a $9 million, $10 million contract, whatever magic number we want to put out there on a short-term deal, there's a very good chance he only plays 90 games or something.
Right.
If he gets banged up, and then all of a sudden you're stuck. You're in the situation of you should have.
Your max patch here ready.
Yeah, you should have cashed in when you had the chance. Well, the one I really think about is, oh my God, I'm totally blanking on his name. The defenseman for Dallas that didn't take the Stars deal and then ends up in Toronto this year. I'm totally blanking. But
oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know either. That's fine. Doesn't matter.
But I think he's got to just go get his paycheck, and
I always assumed he would.
And you probably get it from a contender. There's probably somebody out there with the cap going up that is going to be willing to throw a bunch of money at him.
Chicago, Detroit, Minnesota, whoever's got cap room. Minnesota might be coming out of salary cap hell in a year now, for all we know. So, there are places he can go. There's no question about it. There's a lot of questions. Real quick, because we kind of left it alone. Goaltending clearly cost him. Freddie Anderson, you see him coming back. You got one more year left in a contract. Do you think Rod didn't trust Pyotr Kochetkov, which is why we only saw him once in the playoffs?
There's a lot to unpack there, for sure. I mean, I could see a path to him coming back. I don't see a path to him coming back and being your 1A goalie. I think if he's going to come back, he needs to understand that he's now, you're essentially your backup.
Your
Who's
backup.
going to play 30 games, and you're not going to be the guy that we go to in the playoffs unless we have to. I've pushed back on the playoff Freddie. We've heard that plenty from Toronto people.
I agree.
Because he was really, really good last year.
Great.
I mean, you can't fault him for the loss to the Panthers. But it was rough. It was rough this series. I mean, he looked settled early in this game, and then things.
Right.
He just didn't look settled in his crease. He's a different kind of guy. He's very, you would hope that his personality would allow him to not get sucked into those situations. But it clearly did. I mean, I don't know that we can blame the last 2 goals on him.
No.
The tip is fantastic, and the other one's a, backdoor tap in. But we go back to the beginning of the season when the team struggled. And for whatever reason, when this team stops believing in their goalie, things start to fall apart. And there's a fight in Pyotr Kochetkov that maybe isn't there in Frederik Andersen, at least outwardly.
Yeah.
Freddie might be a burning passion on the inside, but he's never going to show it on the outside.
Right.
Whereas Kochetkov is going to wear his heart on his sleeve. And I think if you are, if you've groomed this kid along to be your goalie, I think you have to, at some point, you have to hand the reins to him and say, all right, kid, here's your chance. Now, if he comes in and he's the guy who plays 50 games, 55 games, and he played 40 this year. I mean, not by design, but he played 40 games this year. Then you need to, you can evaluate him after that. And even if it doesn't work out for a year, it's not like you've broken the bank. It's a $2 million player,
right.
A really smart deal that even if he's the backup, it's a good deal. But it's amusing to me that the area right now, at least if you look at their cap-friendly page, that is most settled is goaltending. And at the same time, it's the place where things are the most volatile.
Yep.
You have a lot of decisions to make. Obviously, Spencer Martin is going to be part of this equation, but I think he's your 3.
Yeah,
so
he's your minor league swing goalie.
And Freddie's got some trade protection, so if you decide you need to move on, he needs to agree he's part of it. But if you're Ottawa, would you call the Hurricanes and say, "Hey, well, all we need is somebody who can be stable for us and get us to we just want to make the playoffs. Like,
right.
Can we make the playoffs, please?" And Freddie will get you there. And so if they decide that we just need to, cut the rope here and try something different aside Kochetkov, I don't think the answer is trying to pursue one of these big name goalies, because goaltending is witchcraft. You just don't know. I mean, Connor Hellebuck was amazing all year for the Jets, and he gets into the playoffs and he totally falls apart. So you just don't know, and that's the hardest part of hockey, I think, and of planning. But what you do know now is that, whether it's durability or reliability, that Frederik Andersen is probably not the answer to win you ultimately what you want to win.
I would bring Antti Ranta back just to hang out on press row with us. One of my favorite humans.
Make him the assistant goalie coach and just let him hang out with us. One of the greatest guys to ever get into a locker room.
It was so cool to see him back. I'm like, man, I couldn't wait till you come back. And like, I never talk about hockey with Antti. It's just weird. We just talk about kids. Cory Lavalette, North State Journal and The Athletic, at Cory Lav. I'm going to reach out because you know more about the sport than anybody I know. So I thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, well, thank you for everything this year, Adam. It's always fun chatting with you, and we'll do it again soon, I'm sure.
You got it. That's Cory Lavalette.